All right, appreciate for the folks who are attending. We're going to go ahead and get this thing kicked off. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the human factor and how that plays into the world of not just identity, but also mobile security. So over the last year, we've been talking a bit about the Lockheed Martin kill chain. And so from our perspective, what we've done is we have turned this over into what we call the modern kill chain. And what this is really out there to do is to really talk about how attacks are now becoming modernized, utilizing more modern endpoints. Where we really kind of focus on this is a couple different areas. So the first part is going to be in the recon phase, social engineering, as well as the initial access. And the reason why this is really starting to become a difficult challenge is really around, from a mobile perspective, there's really limited visibility from a SOC perspective, from a larger security perspective on what's happening within these various different applications, what's happening from an individual identity access management perspective, ultimately what we're now calling the human layer. And so when we start talking a little bit about the modern kill chain and we start talking about threat actors and what they're doing, a lot of folks kind of start to question, okay, well, are threat actors really doing this today? And if we take a look at some of the groups that are highly active, Scattered Spider, probably one of the most well-known that's out there, utilizing mobile as that first initial entry point. This goes to show how they're taking that modern approach through the modern kill chain, utilizing mobile security, or I should say, using mobile as that first initial entry point. Now, we also have another threat actor that Lookout had done some research on called Crypto Chameleon. This was a group that was really going after Coinbase accounts, which eventually ended up targeting into going after the SEC, and in particular, aimed at a phishing campaign going after the users out there. They had manipulated the single sign-on page to try to trick users into logging in, grabbing their credentials, and of course, grabbing MFA. But I want to kind of lay the landscape of what we see at Lookout and what's happening from a mobile attack perspective. So first, I want to kind of go into, well, where are we getting all this data? How are we diving into, the various different aspects of mobile? So first is going to be the telemetry. So we've got about 234 million devices that we're able to dive into from a telemetry aspect that's giving us what the attackers are doing from hardware, from network, from applications, and giving us that insight of how they're attacking that mobile device. Now, we've also done the reverse engineering of over 394 million mobile applications. So we do have some partnerships to where we're getting access into a lot of those mobile applications, but we're also doing a couple of different things with web crawlers and that type of thing, grabbing those mobile applications and then doing static and dynamic analysis to see, okay, what are these mobile applications doing? How are they behaving? And more importantly, what are attackers doing from that same perspective? Now, we've also done the analysis and categorization of over 525 million URLs. So the reason why that's important is when we start talking about phishing kits, when we start talking about smishing, phishing, all sorts of how do I take an approach of tricking a user into clicking on something that they shouldn't, that's where this really kind of comes into play. So a couple of stats that have come out, there were over 4 million mobile focused phishing campaigns that we tracked just last year alone. Through that, there was also 427,000 malicious mobile applications that we identified in enterprise environments. We also found something that was really kind of something that stood out, which was there were 100% more attacks against iOS than we've seen previously. Traditionally, Android, because of how open it is as an operating system, we see this on a regular basis. But last year was really significant in that uptick on iOS. And then, of course, we've also got about 1.6 million applications which we've deemed to be vulnerable. This is either due to leaking information, it's utilizing risky SDKs, maybe there's information that's out there that there's been CVEs applied to those mobile applications. Whatever the case is, It's a application that is utilizing vulnerable attributes in its development. So when we take a look at just from a threat actor perspective and why they're attacking, mobile these days, there are a bunch of various different reasons for that. Obviously with COVID, right, everybody started working from home. Mobile and the utilization of mobile devices really had an uptick because everybody needed a very quick, cheap way to get people working from home. Multi-factor authentication was probably the cheapest way, right? Get the tokens onto the mobile devices. But with that, the attackers also started following suit. More people on mobile means, well, that's where the new attack needs to be. There's money there. There's corporate access that's there. There's sensitive information which I can go and sell as a threat actor. And so you start to really kind of have this perfect storm on why mobile from an adversary perspective or adversarial perspective is really starting to come into the forefront of that threat landscape. Now, when we talk about intelligence services, this is really going to be that nation state where they're utilizing both in conjunction of mobile malware as well as commercial surveillanceware in order to get access to the phone. We are also looking at, from that state-sponsored, very particular, not just, hey, do I have a political opponent, that is running against me, but more of, hey, I'm North Korea, I need to fund my nuclear program. The fastest way to do that, of course, is stealing people's crypto wallets, going after enterprise information, and then selling it, or even launching various different malware campaigns in order to try to recoup money to fund those programs. Ransomware, that still is, a pretty big play, even from a mobile perspective, because mobile is that initial entry point, which they then later on deploy ransomware. In fact, when we take a look at some of the more prolific threat actors that are after monetary gain, a lot of them are still deploying ransomware back into that enterprise environment on their standard desktops. And a lot of them are closely affiliated as well with very specific groups. And of course, you got your run-of-the-mill scammers. I'm sure like a lot of people have been lately getting things like, hey, you get a text message that says, hey, here's an unpaid toll. Click here to pay your $4.12 toll that you missed. And it's just another avenue for people to try to get that monetary gain, but from a mobile perspective. So, when we really kind of talk about mobile and the reason why it's becoming such a pain point, and it's really because users are more likely to click on a phishing link on a mobile device than they are on a standard desktop. Standard desktop, you can hover over the link, you can kind of see where it goes. There's various levels of protection, from firewalls to network prevention systems to URL filtering services. But largely on mobile, that really hasn't had the same love and affection that your standard desktop world does. And so a lot of people kind of flock to MDM or that mobile device management and say, all right, well, I'm just not going to allow certain categories of URLs, or I'm not going to allow people except for very certain domains. And they really try to lock that system down. But the problem that you get there is it doesn't do anything when we talk about that human element. There's nothing that an MDM does to stop phishing. There's nothing that an MDM does that stops malware from being loaded onto the device. It's just not what those systems are designed for. Now, when we talk about AI and the importance of AI, both from a defensive standpoint, but also from an offensive standpoint, there's been a couple of things that we've seen. So from an AI perspective, phishing messages have gotten really darn near close to perfection as far as the English language is concerned. This is making things a little bit more believable. It's making them really tailored to very specific attack campaigns. And because of that, people are clicking more and more on these links. Now, it's not just enough to be sitting here talking about phishing. Kind of want to dive into something that's a little bit more a little bit different. So when we talk about commercial surveillanceware, we're really talking about groups like Pegasus from NSO Group, Predator. There's a whole bunch of other vendors out there that we're tracking today. The ability to utilize exploit chains or multiple exploits in order to have zero-click capability, which means there's zero user interaction from a mobile device perspective to have this malware loaded. It's really starting to become on the rise. In fact, there's over 80 countries that have been purchasing commercial surveillanceware since we started tracking this back in 2016. But what this capability allows people to do is things like enable the microphone on your mobile device, enable geolocation and being able to track where people are, being able to enable the camera, being able to exfiltrate information on the device. And if that device has access to other sources such as email or cloud-based services, or when we start talking about other sensitive information, that's where these can really start to cause a problem, because now you're talking about the commercial surveillanceware isn't just looking at that human factor, but now it's also looking at the corporate side of the house. Now, APT groups, they're also really, really well ingrained with mobile from an attack perspective. APT 41, turns out that they've been attacking mobile for about 10 years, longer than anyone else had really realized that when we came out with this report about a year or two ago now. But these folks all have their various different avenues of why they're targeting individuals, why they're targeting enterprises. Most of it's because they want to go after something that's towards that one particular nation's goal. Mentioned North Korea earlier, going after their nuclear program. China's super interested because they're doing everything from learning what's the best way to grow grain in a troubled system, what kind of pesticides are being used, to how do I better enhance my petroleum within my country? Is there certain recipes I need to follow? Is there better manufacturing processes, better delivery methods that I should be using? Then we get into Russia. Now, of course, Russia's also been heavily involved on the mobile front. In fact, there's going to be a use case I'm going to talk here in a second, but for the most part, Russia seems like they've been tied up with Ukraine for the most part. We do see them here and there from an attack perspective and various different malware campaigns, but it's not as prevalent as China, North Korea, India. There's a couple of other countries that we've been tracking. Not to say that Russia, again, isn't attacking utilizing mobile. They still are. It's just they're a little bit more focused currently. So that first one I want to talk about from a Russia standpoint. During our discovery with infamous Chisel, we identified something called D-blind. D-blind is another payload that could be utilized in conjunction with infamous Chisel. This campaign was really specifically targeted on the Ukrainian command and control tablets that Ukraine is using for everything from drone warfare to artillery strikes, troop movements, you name it. And this is, of course, what Russia wanted to get access to because they want to understand, their attack vectors so they can better put up defenses. Worm Spy and Dragon Egg was really interesting. This is APT 41. I was talking a little bit earlier on. So what's been kind of interesting here is watching China actually upgrade their tooling. And when they upgrade their tooling, they're using some of the same compromised systems. In this case, there was a particular certificate that was getting reused. But this malware enables them to have pretty close to the same types of capabilities as various different surveillanceware software that's out there today from just specifically for mobile. And the last one's going to be Bad Bazaar. Again, this is another Chinese threat actor. There's been a ton of both mobile malware and campaigns out of China. But this was in particular because it was an iOS variant of malware that was already existing. Now they did target both Android and iOS, but they were targeting Tibetans and the Uyghurs, trying to find out, hey, are they speaking out against China? What exactly are they doing? But there was really a lot of tracking and collection capabilities that this malware enabled them to have. So the bigger kind of question that obviously after talking about the threats is, well, great, well, what can be done about it? So some of the things that we're starting to talk about and some of the things that we're doing today is integrating with XDR capabilities or SIM, depending on what's getting utilized, but really starting to try to get to that left of boom scenario. So when we're starting to take a look at things like phishing campaigns, today, if a user gets phished, does an organization know that that's even happening? Now, if they've got us, obviously today that answer is going to be yes, but because we can now tie in to that aspect of, hey, you have a user who's constantly getting phished, it's a legitimate, looks like a legitimate message. We're utilizing in conjunction with, some AI detection capabilities around what that phishing message looks like. Is it part of a larger campaign? We can flag that. That information gets sent to the XDR. An analytical rule can be written within UABA. Therefore, now you can start enforcing on your identity access management software. If that device does become compromised or becomes flagged, you can now just cut that access of that identity itself. That in itself is getting us to a much faster response time, a much faster, way or capability to reduce the risk of the organization, because now that we've known individuals are getting phished, that something is definitely going to be happening soon. How we operate is pretty complicated, but overall, between all of the data that we're getting from the applications that are on the mobile device, between all the web crawlers that we're utilizing to grab mobile applications, various different campaigns that are happening on the dark web, we've got APIs that are tagged into the various mobile app stores, such as iOS, the Apple Store and the Google Store. All of that information, comes into us. We, of course, then start looking at static and dynamic analysis. We're looking at reputation analysis, which is how many times has a piece of malware been downloaded? How many times has it been installed? We've got a couple different AI engines that are looking at fuzzy logic and binary similarities. All of that drives various different detection engines. So it's not enough to just say, hey, here's an app that's malicious, right? We got our start as a company on detecting, from a network perspective, vulnerabilities in Bluetooth. So even though, yes, that application piece is a large part of what we do, we also have various different detection engines for things like device compromise, network compromise. We've got various risk and compliance capabilities that we're bringing to the table around our vulnerability analysis and vulnerability management. We've got our anti-phishing capabilities, which includes executive impersonation, which was something that we came out with a little bit earlier this year as we started to see threat actors move towards that impersonation of both government officials as well as high-ranking individuals in various different organizations. Now, of course, this all gets to be churned up by our threat intelligence team and turned into threat intelligence. It's not just indicators of compromise and hash values and C2 information, but also the contextual aspect of what is this threat actor doing from a campaign perspective? How are they using mobile in order to get into that larger enterprise environment? They establish a foothold, live off the land, steal what they need to, whether they want to deploy ransomware and get out, or if they want to maintain persistence within the environment. That's a little bit down the road from where we get to see on from a mobile perspective. But the important part there is the fact that, hey, it happened from that mobile device first. So when we churn through that intel, of course, this leads into things like being able to provide that contextual alerting within the administrative console. It allows us to also export a lot of that data through our APIs, so you can import that into XDR, SIM, or other systems that you might be using. But more importantly, that's going to give you that more fuller viewpoint of, I've got an attacker who's now attacking a mobile device. Somehow they got into our system. We lost a bunch of data. Ransomware got deployed. How did that all look like? So now you've actually got that full viewpoint of everything from that initial phish to then once they landed on a desktop. So with that, just got a couple of minutes left. So if there's questions, feel free. Otherwise, that's what I've got for you today.